So this video is in relation to this comment that was left. It's not directed towards him individually. It's more of a community. So I created a little diagram here to kind of give you an idea of how the base works inside your cabin with the windows up and the windows down. This doesn't relate to all systems. There's some systems that do well with the windows up. There's some that do well with the windows down. It has a lot to do with the way your cabin, your subwoofer, your power, all that relates to each other. So essentially the base note is going to travel the path of least resistance, and so if you enclose your vehicle, that base note is going to travel past you, hit the windshield, come back, and then that second note is coming at the same time that it's coming back, and then you could see that cancellation, especially if you have a much larger system and a smaller cabin, where it doesn't have a chance to really spread out and kind of dissipate, I guess, per se. So essentially, when you roll your windows down, the base note is going to travel the path of least resistance and use your cabin as a ported enclosure. So that's where you're going to see your pickup in your, possibly in your DBs. I'm not saying that's in all cases. You could also actually have it where your sub unloads from having too much airspace. So that's why most time if you just kind of creep it a little bit open, you'll see a pickup in the base note and it'll sound a lot better. So on the one side, you'll see the base note traveling, hitting the windshield, coming back and getting the cancellation. On the other one, you're going to see the base note travel and it'll go out the windows. There will be some that will still hit the windshield and come back, but it does reduce that cancellation. So a lot of people forget that your cabin is also a part of that enclosure. So you do have the sub box, and your sub is going to be mounted inside that box. And when it comes down, it compresses the air on the inside of the box and acts as a suspension. So that's why if you change the enclosure size, it will act differently based off of how large or how small that enclosure is, and it'll also affect how much power it will take to overcome that enclosure space. But the outside also acts like an enclosure also. So smaller cabins or larger cabins are going to have a large effect on the outside of the cone, keeping that sub in line. So along with that, that's where you see, like, okay, I have the same sub but a different amp, or I have the same sub and the same amp, but it's reacting differently in my vehicle compared to somebody else's vehicle. It all has to do with the way the amount of cabin airspace affects the cone travel along with the inside of the box travel. So that's why if you open up the windows a little bit, you're essentially creating a larger airspace for that sub, and you're kind of reducing the amount of suspension and travel up. And that's why if you go too much and you just play it open, it almost becomes free air, and you lose that suspension travel, and that's where you can get a lot of that, that extended travel, which too much of it, you get unloading. Too little, you're choking off your sub. If you have too small of a space for that subwoofer, it's going to have to fight harder to create the same note that it would if it had the proper airspace. So by kind of tuning that windows down, you essentially create a ported enclosure using your cabin. I hope you found this information useful. I just tried to make this as digestible as possible for people who don't quite understand the reason why you see an increase, but there's definitely a lot more that goes into this. So if anybody has any information, please drop it down. I just tried to make this as digestible as possible. And again, drop anything in the comments, any questions you have, and I'll try to film it for you.